Lieutenant Governor and triggers a historic snap election. How the premier is making the case for a rare winter election campaign and how his critics continue to question his motivations. That's coming up tonight.
And in one of his final pre-election actions, Ford gears up to remove bike lanes in Toronto. We have reaction.
Plus, a quarter century in the making. Toronto's Waterfront revitalization plan is getting a nearly $1 billion boost. More on what the mayor is calling a city within a city.
And we are under a winter weather travel advisory tonight, and it could be impacting the evening commute. We could get between 5 to 10 centimeters of snow.
You're watching Live at 5.
Good evening. I'm Bakari Sapp.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5. It is now official. A provincial election is set. Ontarians will head to the polls in less than a month.
How are you feeling, Premier?
See everyone in Windsor. We're going to protect Ontario.
Lieutenant Governor Edith Dumont has agreed to dissolve the legislature at Doug Ford's request, triggering an early election February 27th.
What I'll tell the people of Ontario, we're going to see an unprecedented attack to our families, to our businesses, to our communities, something that we've never seen in the history of the country, getting economically attacked by the largest country in the world, the most powerful person in the world when it comes to President Trump. And we're going to be there for them. We're going to support the people. We're going to protect the people, protect their jobs, protect communities, protect businesses, just like we did during the pandemic. But this is going to be more of an impact.
And CP24's Beatrice Faceman is live at Queen's Park with the latest reaction. Beatrice, this has been an open secret there for months now.
It certainly has, Elena. And so this morning when we heard from Premier Doug Ford, and you just heard his answer there to my question asking, what can you tell Ontarians about why, in your view, this is not an opportunistic election? You heard the Premier there justifying why he believes this early snap election is necessary 17 months ahead of when his mandate would actually end in June 2026. You also heard him say protect Ontario as he was walking into the Lieutenant Governor's office this afternoon. That's his campaign slogan, the slogan that he's running on in this election. He says he needs people to come out overwhelmingly to support him in order to give him a mandate to kind of withstand the next 4 years of a Trump presidency. When it comes to the "see you in Windsor" comment, that's where the Premier is kicking off his campaign tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. as the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of this province. He's going to be across the bridge from Detroit, an important border city, Windsor as that is, with the Detroit skyline in the background. And that's going to be his location for where he has essentially his opening address to the people of this province as they get ready to cast their ballots. As for what's happening elsewhere across the other opposition parties, Bonnie Crombie, she's going to be up in Barrie tomorrow. Depends which riding she's going to be in, but both of them up there are currently held by cabinet ministers in the Ford government. Barrie-Innisfil, previously a Liberal riding when Kathleen Wynne was the Premier. It was lost to the Tories back in 2018, but obviously Bonnie Crombie feeling as though maybe there's a bit of wiggle room there for her. Marit Stiles, the leader of the official opposition, is going to be here in Toronto, as will Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, who's spending his day in his home riding of Guelph today. But it will be up to the opposition leaders to try to remind Ontarians about the Ford government's record, reminding them of the Greenbelt scandal, the RCMP investigation, the Ford government's record on housing, on health care. That's what we expect to hear from the opposition leaders. And so here's a bit of what we heard from Bonnie Crombie and from Mike Schreiner earlier today.
Right now, it's Doug Ford, quite frankly, who's plunging us into an early and unnecessary election. As we all know, he has a mandate to govern until June of 2026, but he'd rather spend $175 million on putting us into an early and unnecessary election when we need calm, stability, and a plan to deal with the tariff threat that is Donald Trump that is coming south of the border.
We should be 100% united across party lines and focused on pushing back against Trump's tariff threat. Instead of having the stability and the strength of unity that would create, the Premier's creating more chaos. He's injecting partisan politics into Ontario politics at a time when we need to show strength through unity.
All right, two things to finish this off. Bonnie Crombie, we now know where she's going to run. She announced today here on CP24 she'll be putting her name on the ballot in Mississauga, East Cooksville. She is, of course, the former mayor of Mississauga. Also, Premier Doug Ford today confirming that his cabinet's already seen today. The caucus has already seen the plan when it comes to spending tens of billions of dollars to combat the threat of these tariffs. That's a plan he says he'll reveal to Ontarians over the course of the next 28 days. Again, Ontarians, go to the polls. Lena and Bakari, February 27th. Back to you.
All right, here we go. Beatrice Faisman, live at Queen's Park. Thanks so much, Beatrice. Well, the Ford government is taking another step in its plan to remove bike lanes on 3 major Toronto streets.
Yeah, CP24's Melissa Duggan joins us live along University Avenue with the details. Melissa.
Yeah, Bakari and Lena, some significant updates when it comes to the fate of bike lanes across 3 of the busiest streets in the city, Yonge, Bloor, and here along University. The Ford government revealing today that they have hired an engineering company to look at the design work, how things would play out when you remove the bike lanes and replace them with lanes for vehicles. Not only that, our colleagues at CTV News confirming with the Transportation Ministry's office that this company is prepared to get that work started, possibly as early as the spring. They say they want to get it done as early as possible. And all of that information coming just hours before the legislature was dissolved today. So in the final hours that this Ford government was in power, this is what we're hearing from them. As for what we're hearing from people today in the downtown when they're learning about this news, about the fate of these bike lanes, here's what they have to tell us.
It's a lot better, mostly because a lot of cyclists usually, I've noticed, don't really use them in the end, and they end up still not following the law, or going on a safer route. So I think that it was more of a waste of money in the end.
There's no point destroying it. It's going to cost like $48-50 million. They could use that money to improve the current infrastructure rather than just destroying it, because these bike lanes come very handy when there's the gridlock.
Premier Doug Ford has repeatedly said the reason why he wants to get rid of these bike lanes is to fight congestion and gridlock in the city. The city of Toronto has put out an estimate saying getting rid of these bike lanes would cost an estimated $48 million. Putting them in the first place, by the way, cost $27 million. Ford reacting previously to those numbers, by the way, saying that they were hogwash. It was late last year when the provincial government passed a bill, by the way, that would allow the province to get rid of these bike lanes along Yonge, along Bloor, along University. And not only that, it would require municipalities to get permission from the province if they were going to put out new bike lanes. We're getting some reaction from City Hall, some pushback coming from Councillor Josh Matlow. Here's what he has to say.
Doug Ford, everything from the 2018 election that he tore up in the middle of an election, to the bike lanes, to planning, to so much more, seems far more interested in either running for mayor of Toronto or replacing Pierre Poilievre as the Conservative Party leader in Ottawa, rather than being Premier of Ontario that he was elected to do. In fact, he doesn't seem to want to even do that right now. He's more interested in running for election.
Mayor Olivia Chow has previously said that getting rid of these bike lanes would actually make congestion worse. And as for biking advocates, they say that this getting rid of the bike lanes would put cyclist safety at risk. Back to you, Lena Bakari.
Okay, live along University Avenue, CP24's Melissa Duggan. Thank you. Well, QP's Ontario Council of Hospital Unions is sounding the alarm about what it says is a growing crisis in the province's health system.
The union set up stretchers outside Queen's Park today, along with signs listing some of the stats. It aims to shine a spotlight on rising hospital deficits, lack of capacity, and a sharp increase in hallway health care under Doug Ford's rule.
And Doug Allen is a senior healthcare researcher with QP. He shared some stats about where Ontario stands.
The most recent report on hallway patients reveals that there's now 1,860 patients that are being taken care of in hallways, stalls, closets, whatever it is, not actual hospital rooms in Ontario. That is an increase of 1,036 beds since the Ford government was elected, on a promise in 2018 to end hallway healthcare. He hasn't ended it. He's made it 125% worse.
The 2,000 people on stretchers in our hospitals, which this represents, begging for a bed today. The 50,000 people who can't get into long-term care, and the 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor. And on that note, the scheme that was announced yesterday lacks credibility. The Ontario Medical Association was quick to point out the numbers don't stand up to scrutiny. They don't account for population growth.
Now the stretchers will travel to 30 different communities that have struggled with ER closures, a lack of family doctors, and a loss of acute care beds. Time now is 5:11, feeling more like -11 out there, even though it's -5. Let's get a check on that evening commute with our traffic specialist, Adjoa Nsiayabwa. Hey there, Adj.
Hey, Alina, and welcome back. We were dealing with a lot of problems. We do have one, a brand new issue. Actually, I was going to say nothing was going on, and that'd make me a liar, but we are dealing with issues. Watching them on camera now, this is the northbound lanes of the 427, just north of the 409. Little bit of good news is this collision. It's off to the left shoulder. It was blocking the HOV lane, really close to that lane, and with this light flurry activity, reducing visibility a bit, so just drive with a bit of extra care. Also, some problems happening on the 401. If you're traveling on the eastbound side. This is the exit ramp that takes you to Mississauga Road. Actually, it's the westbound side. It's the right lane and shoulder that is occupied. Rest of the 401 is pretty busy across the top of the city, but no live lane issues and very jammed. And a little bit of light flurries on the northbound 410 if you're traveling into Brampton. Still have problems happening in Etobicoke on Kipling and Evans. I'll send it back to you both.
All right, thanks a lot, Adj. Right now, it is 5:12, holding at 5 below zero. This is Live at 5.
Police have identified the victim of Toronto's first homicide of the year. They haven't released how he was killed. The latest on that investigation next. Welcome back. Police have identified the victim of the city's first homicide of the year.
Yeah, 27-year-old Daryl Chauvin was pronounced dead after being found with severe injuries in the area of Bloor and Madison Avenue. This was around 12:30 Sunday morning. So police haven't said how Chauvin was killed, only describing the interaction and the annex as a wounding situation. So investigators are trying to identify 3 suspects and encouraging them to turn themselves in. So anyone with information, they're asked to contact police.
Well, 2 girls who pleaded guilty in a fatal swarming of a homeless man downtown have been sentenced to probation. One of the girls pleaded guilty last year to manslaughter in the death of 59-year-old Kenneth Lee and will be on probation for 2 years. Will also take part in a community-based program. Now, the other girl pleaded guilty to assault with a weapon and assault causing bodily harm and will be on probation for a year. Before sentencing, the girls tried to get charges against them stayed, arguing their charter rights had been violated when they were repeatedly strip searched at a youth detention facility. The judge ruled today that their privacy rights had been violated, but added that it shouldn't be remedied, that rather it should be remedied through a reduced sentence instead of a stay.
Well, police say that Kenneth Lee, who was living in the city shelter system, was swarmed and stabbed by a group of 8 girls. This was in December of 2022. 2 more girls, they're set to face a judge-alone trial. This is going to be in the coming days on charges of second-degree murder. 2 others, they're going to have a jury trial. That'll be in May.
Well, the threat of massive U.S. tariffs just days away now.
Yeah, Ottawa announced a $1.3 billion plan to shore up border security. This is after Donald Trump accused Canada of failing to curb the illegal flow of people and drugs across the border into the U.S. So Trump suggested on the day of his inauguration that Canada could be hit with tariffs February 1st. So OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrick joined us live earlier today with more on the ramped-up efforts at the border crossings.
In Ontario, there's over 2,800 kilometers of border between Ontario and the U.S. A lot of it is geographically challenging. It's water crossings, it's dense bush. So we use a variety of techniques relying on our air support program, helicopters, fixed wing, platforms, drones. We're patrolling on snowmobiles, ATVs, where weather permits, on vessels, a variety of tactics used to ensure that our borders are as secure as they can be.
24's crime analyst Steve Ryan for a closer look at the efforts to step up security at the border. You've been following this really closely, Steve. Is this going to make a difference? What are the challenges that may arise?
Well, there's 2,800 kilometers of border between the United States and Canada. Now, the border crossings are staffed by the CBSA, and they've been asking for more resources, more technology to help them. But a lot of this border is unstaffed, and it's not legitimate crossing areas. So these 200 officers are going to be dedicated to this. They are part of Operation Deterrence. And that will work. They will catch people, and it will deter people from bringing guns and drugs into the country. And once you choke off that supply, you'll see that almost immediately here in the city of Toronto.
Okay, Steve, without this threat, would this have ever happened?
So I'm not so convinced that the OPP are doing this because of the threat. There was action from the feds because of the threat made by Donald Trump with regards to drugs and human trafficking going into the United States. The feds acted quickly. But this move by the OPP is not as a result of the threat, in my belief. I know the provincial government was working with the OPP to shore up these borders, so I just think this is part of the natural progression.
It's no secret that there is a lot of political pressure on the OPP right now, though. You've got Donald Trump breathing down our necks, asking for this beefed up security effort. How challenging, then, is that for the OPP when they're just trying to do their jobs and protect people?
Well, I do think that these 200 officers will be effective when it comes to stopping things coming into the country. Remember, a country is concerned about what enters their country, not what exits their country. And what the President of the United States was talking about was exiting Canada and leaving the United States. That would be the state's responsibility. Canada would not be so concerned about anything going into the United States. That's the state's job to do that. So the roles were reversed, but I think the overall outcome would be the same, and that would be net, because even if the feds patrolled that border on the president's requests, it still might stop drugs and guns from coming into Canada as well.
Hey, Steve, what all is this going to entail? Like, how many agencies, who all has to cooperate with the other person?
Yeah, great question. So the CBSA, perhaps even the Criminal Intelligence Services, the RCMP, all the other bordering police services that are up near the American borders, and the OPP, of course, they've got responsibility for the entire country. 2,800 kilometers again, and the commissioner had said that 2,100 guns were seized in Ontario from the United States. 91% of all guns came from the United States. So the problem is coming into the country, not so much exiting the country.
All right, Steve, good to get your perspective on this as always.
Sure.
So appreciate this. It is 5:15, -5 out there. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, we're going to take a look at how all three levels of government, they're coming together to speed up development of Toronto's waterfront.
Well, a major funding announcement today for the redevelopment of the city's eastern waterfront. All three levels of government, they're contributing nearly $1 billion in total toward that project.
At CP24's Phil Perkins joins us live from the newsroom with the details. Phil, almost $1 billion?
I mean, it's not the first time that all levels of government, Bakari and Lena, have contributed towards the Portlands, the redevelopment on the east part of Lakeshore. Because when you think about it, the city of Toronto, not very many neighborhoods are undiscovered. They're literally creating a brand new neighborhood. So in years past, all three levels of government put money together, $1.4 billion for the Portlands Flood Protection Plan, literally diverting the flow of the Don Rivers to prevent flooding. So this is new money, $325 million each from all levels of government, nearly $1 billion. That's in an effort to speed up the construction of the homes here. So they're expecting around 14,000 new homes to be built on what used to be called Villiers Island. You can see they've built roads. They've basically shut down the original Cherry Street. They rebuilt Cherry Street. They have several new bridges there. They're building what looks like a playground, a park, a walkway by the new Don River and its new flow. You can see some of the renderings there, what it'll look like once it is completed. So again, 14,000 new homes. 24% of these new homes will be affordable rental units. They're going to have 2, 3, and 4 bedroom homes as well. So families, their hope is to settle there and grow and make it a real neighborhood. So here is Mayor Olivia Chow and Infrastructure Minister Kinga Surma.
You can have all the land ready. You can have all the developers, and I see some of them. They're here, ready to build the housing. Everything is ready, but if you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the roads and the pipes and the sewage, how are you going to build the homes? How are you?
This is a very special moment for me. I remember many years ago, about 13, 14 years ago, when I worked at Toronto City Hall. I know that back then there were a lot of discussions happening about what does the future for Waterfront look like? What does the future for the Portlands look like? And today I get to stand here as the representative of the provincial government and announce a $325 million investment to make sure that we unlock those lands and so that we can build housing, community amenities, and a destination location for the people of Toronto, but also for Ontario.
Yeah, about that money. Obviously, we're soon to be in a provincial election. The federal government in flux right now. Mayor Olivia Chow was asked, is that money actually coming? She said it is on its way right now. And so the next step is a site service to actually put shovels in the ground, hopefully by next year, with people moving in, according to Mayor Olivia Chow, at 2031. So it's exciting stuff, but we'll see. Construction, as we know in the city of Toronto, always delays, but it's exciting nonetheless.
Okay, Phil Perkins live in our newsroom tonight. Thanks so much for this, Phil. Okay. You're watching Live at 5.
Well, coming up, we're going to tell you how Google Maps is addressing U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to rename the Gulf of Mexico.
The most famous painting in the world is moving as part of a major renovation at the Louvre.
Yeah, French President Emmanuel Macron says that the Mona Lisa will get its own dedicated room inside the museum in Paris. The overhaul of the world's busiest museum will also include a new entrance near the River Seine and the creation of underground rooms. Macron did not disclose the cost of the project, but it is estimated to run into hundreds of millions of euros.
Well, Google Maps is jumping on President Donald Trump's plan to rename the Gulf of Mexico.
Here's what's going to happen. U.S. users will now see it as the Gulf of America. Mexican users will still see the Gulf of Mexico, while all other countries will see both names on Google Maps. And Trump announced the name change in a flurry of executive orders hours after taking office.
It's 5:28 minus 5. You're watching Live at 5.
And its official Ontario residents will be heading to the polls February 27th. The Lieutenant Governor approving Doug Ford's request today to dissolve the legislature and trigger an election. Doug Ford meets with the lieutenant governor and triggers a historic snap election. How the premier is making the case for a rare winter election campaign and how his critics continue to question his motives. That's coming up.
And in one of his final pre-election actions, Ford gears up to remove bike lanes in Toronto. We have reaction tonight.
Plus, a quarter century in the making, Toronto's Waterfront revitalization plan is getting a nearly $1 billion boost. More on what the mayor is calling a city within a city.
And we are under a winter weather travel advisory tonight, and that could impact your evening commute. We could get between 5 to 10 centimeters of snowfall.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Lena Latifat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. It is now official. A provincial election is set. Ontarians will head to the polls in less than a month.
How are you feeling, Premier?
See everyone in Windsor. We're going to protect Ontario.
See everybody in Windsor. Got to protect Ontario. That's what Doug Ford told our Beatrice Faisman as he entered the Lieutenant Governor's office. She's agreed to dissolve the legislature at Doug Ford's request, triggering an early election on February 27th.
Right now, President Trump has put uncertainty. Has put uncertainty to every single Canadian, a lot of other countries around the world. And this isn't going to happen overnight. May not happen February 1st. I'm sure something's coming, but this is going to be a battle for the next 4 years. And I want to make sure that I have a strong mandate to outlast President Trump.
CP24's Beatrice Faisman is live at Queen's Park with the latest reaction tonight. Everybody has a lot to say about this, Beatrice.
Everybody does have a lot to say about it, Lena. They'll have a lot to say about it for the next month or so until February 27th, when voters actually do go to the polls. When it comes to what the Premier is saying, you heard Protect Ontario. That's his slogan for this campaign. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., he'll be in Windsor to kick off his campaign as the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. He'll have the Detroit skyline in the background, kicking off the campaign in an important border city, a border city that would suffer immensely economically, Lena and Bakari, if these 25% tariffs that Donald Trump has threatened actually do come to fruition, whether February 1st or after that. And so the Premier using that as a backdrop to send his message to voters that, hey, I need another 4 years to outlast President Trump, to pour tens of billions of dollars to stimulate the economy if needed. By the way, his cabinet and caucus have already seen his fiscal plan. They got a blueprint of it today. It was discussed. Nothing was passed. But the Premier is saying he'll be sharing that blueprint with Ontarians over the course of the next 28 days. As for opposition party leaders, their job, Lena and Bakari, is to remind people of what they say are shortcomings in the Ford government. They'll be talking about things like hallway health care, the lack of family doctors for millions of Ontarians. They'll be talking about funding for education. They'll be talking about the Greenbelt scandal and the RCMP investigation. So that's going to be their focus through the campaign. We've been hearing from a lot of these analysts and pundits today about what's in store. And so here's more from Kim Wright, an NDP strategist, and Jamie Ellerton, a Conservative. Listen.
When we start to look at these blue-orange New Democrat versus Conservative ridings, that Kitchener-Waterloo to Windsor corridor, Northern Ontario, Eastern Ontario, we're also looking at places like where we came in a strong second, in places like Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, no longer has a Conservative seat. That's now an open seat. York South Weston, where Michael Ford was the MPP, is now an open seat, where these are strong areas that we have seen both support from donors and campaigns in the past, and that we're ready to go in those areas.
The challenges for the opposition parties will be, can they reframe the narrative and provide a competing alternative vision for where the province could go and hold Doug Ford to account for some of his shortcomings? Or will the province ultimately go for the let's go steady as she goes? Things might not be great, they might not be amazing, but they could be a lot worse, and we trust Doug to kind of continue to drag along. That's ultimately going to be the framing of the debate. The early week of this is going to be trying to frame what the election ballot question is going to be.
All right, so we know Doug Ford's in Windsor tomorrow morning. Marit Stiles, NDP leader, she's going to be here in Toronto. Bonnie Crombie, the Liberal leader, we now know where she's going to run. She told CP24 this morning she's putting her name on the ballot in Mississauga, East Cooksville. Of course, she's the former mayor of Mississauga. Tomorrow, she kicks off the campaign up in Barrie, which is quite interesting. Two ridings up there, Barrie Innisfil and Barrie Springwater, Oro-Medonte. Both of them are held by Ford cabinet ministers. Prior to 2018, under Premier Wynne, Barrie Innisfil was a Liberal riding. So interesting that Bonnie Crombie seems to think that there's some wiggle room up there for her this time around, potentially. Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, he's in Guelph in his home riding today. He'll be back in Toronto tomorrow. And so here we go. As Kim Wright, the NDP strategist, said, this is the playoffs when it comes to politics, and let the games begin.
Yeah, and these leaders have to hit the ground running. It's a very short campaign. Tomorrow's day one. Beatrice, thanks so much for this.
Well, also, the Ford government is taking another step in its plan to remove bike lanes on 3 major Toronto streets.
Yeah, CP24's Melissa Duggan joins us from University Avenue with all those details. Melissa.
Hey, Lena and Bakari. Yeah, so seemingly the province now one step closer to ripping up a bunch of bike lanes, specifically on 3 of the busiest streets in the city, Yonge Street, Bloor Street, and University, which is where I am right now. The province announcing today they have hired an engineering firm, asking them to draw up designs how it would look when these bike lanes along these 3 streets are removed and they're replaced by lanes for vehicular traffic. This coming after we have heard for quite some time from the provincial government about their thoughts on bike lanes. Premier Doug Ford is saying he's heard from people saying that they despise them. The idea here, get rid of them to try to improve the gridlock situation across the city. Of course, we have been hearing from bike advocates saying that getting rid of these bike lanes will put cyclist safety at risk. But it was late last year when the province really made some big moves to kind of get this to happen, passing a bill that would allow the province to rip up the bike lanes along these 3 streets. And not only that, municipalities would have to get the okay from the provincial government in order to put in new bike lanes. And on top of that, this bill would also protect the provincial government when it comes to lawsuits for anyone and their families who may be injured or killed on streets where the bike lanes have been removed. Pushback to this idea coming today at City Hall from Councillor Josh Matlow. Here he is.
It really is amazing. While Doug Ford is neglecting healthcare, neglecting education, neglecting our Ontario's most vulnerable, blowing $1 billion on getting booze into corner stores early, and seemingly running for potentially the governor of Canada one day. He's meddling into how we design our streets in the city of Toronto. And that's got to end. This is why I have an item on the agenda today to do work toward creating a charter city in Toronto, finally having the powers, the accountability, the autonomy to just run a city the way that big cities around the world already do.
Even though if we have a bike lanes, it's really difficult to ride and do the deliveries. And for other drivers as well, for other bicyclists, it will be difficult.
If it gets rid of gridlock, especially in the downtown area, I'd say it's pretty good.
Where are we going to bike around if they are going to be removed? It's kind of a worry for all of us in Toronto because we bike all over the place. But hey, wishing for the best.
So this update from the Ford government, by the way, coming just hours before the legislature was dissolved today. As for how quickly things could move, our colleagues at CTV News confirming with the Transportation Ministry office, they say they want to get work started as soon as possible or by the spring. Back to you.
Okay, live along University Avenue, CP24's Melissa Duggan. And with that, it's now 5:39. You saw the snow falling. Let's check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Angela and Thierry Bois. And it was a busy afternoon. Are we seeing the effect of the snowfall on the commute right now?
You know what? It's actually not that bad. Now, the snowbank is coming down. It's pretty light. It's not really sticking to the ground, reducing visibility a bit. So just take your time and drive with a bit of extra care. But I actually have a little bit of good news, Bakari and Lena. We had problems on the northbound lanes of the 427 north of the 409. Was a collision. It was in the HOV lane. Problems cleared. But as you make your way home, again, this light snow is making for a little bit of a slick drive. So take your time, drive with some caution. Also problems on the Toronto Van QEW. This is at the start of the ramp that takes you to Cawthra. It is just a stalled vehicle that does have the right lane occupied. And if you're traveling towards the 401, just hearing of problems, just going to scan a couple of my cameras to see if I can spot it. I'm not able to see it right now, but it was reported eastbound 401. It's probably east of the DVP and the collectors, so closer to Vic Park. Looks like we are dealing with a collision that does have the right lane blocked. If I get a visual, I'll keep you in the know. I'll send it back to you both.
All right, Aj, thanks so much for this. Well, as we mentioned and Adjoa was talking about, a winter weather travel advisory has now been issued for Toronto.
Environment Canada says 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. That's expected tonight, which could lead to reduced visibility for drivers. So the snow is expected to taper off tomorrow morning. The travel advisory covers the entire Golden Horseshoe. 5:40, -6 out there. You're watching live at 5. And coming up, a dog was killed and a coyote encounter. This was near Bathurst and Lakeshore. We're going to hear from Chico's owner next. A reminder now of the risks that coyotes can pose in the city after the death of a small dog. Yeah, Jessica says that her Chihuahua, Chico, was killed by a coyote last Friday night near Canoe Landing Park in the Bathurst and Lakeshore area. It happened while she was walking her 2 small dogs.
Right on the corner, he just popped out and grabbed Chico. And on leash, I had 2 leashes. He grabbed Chico and just took off. And I fell. I scraped both of my knees, trying to hold on to him. And he just grabbed him and just ran up. Okay. Last fall, a coyote went after a dog on a leash.
This is on the front porch of a home in Liberty Village. The city says it encourages residents to report any aggressive behavior. So the city is in the process of reviewing its Coyote strategy, and staff will report back to council later this year.
Well, a major funding announcement today for the redevelopment of the city's eastern waterfront. All three levels of government, they're contributing nearly $1 billion in total toward that project.
Yeah, CP24's Phil Perkins joins us live from the newsroom with the details. Phil, we're talking about $1 billion and how many new homes?
Well, 14,000 new homes, Bakari and Lena. 24% will be affordable rental housing. As we mentioned before, not a lot of new neighborhoods in the city of Toronto. It's all been discovered. So this is literally the creation of a brand new neighborhood. This isn't the first time all three levels of government have spent nearly $1 billion, actually spent over that, $1.4 billion in order to divert the Don River to try to prevent any flooding in this new area. They've built bridges, they've built parks. Now they just got to build these homes. And this $975 million, $325 million each, will help accelerate the process here. Here's Beach's East York MP Nathaniel Erskine-Smith about this new spending.
There's over 14,000 homes that are going to be able to be built because of the efforts and the revitalization here on our waterfront. So there's a lot that's going to happen here, and different people have different visions of what they want to see. But the main thing that I want to leave you with is when we think of that opportunity, it's opportunity to get homes built and to continue to grow the community that we know and love here in the city, and that we're also committed to building up.
Yeah, that's what it could look like at the end. They're hoping to get first occupancy around 2031. You can go there right now. There's new bridges, new roads, Cherry Beach Barbecue. It's been there this entire time. Great barbecue. Check that out. One thing they still need to do, though, is figure out transit. The Waterfront East LRT still in the design phase. You can build it, but how are people going to get there? Preferably not by car. That would be treacherous driving. Back to you, too.
All right, CP24's Phil Perkins live from the newsroom. Thousands of new homes, revitalization of the waterfront. It's 5:46, holding at 6 below zero. This is Live at 5.
Well, coming up after the break, we'll tell you why snowbirds are selling off their homes in Florida.
A federal inquiry into foreign interference says that there is no evidence of traitors in Parliament conspiring with foreign states.
In her final report released today, the inquiry commissioner concluded that while the threat of foreign meddling is real, our democratic institutions have held up well against it. The report also says there is no indication the overall results of recent federal elections were altered by a foreign actor. However, the commissioner found the government sometimes reacted too slowly and information did not always flow properly to make decision makers.
Although a few situations involving attempts to curry favor or develop problematic relationship with a parliamentarian have come to light, such phenomena remain marginal and so far appear to have been largely ineffective. Some may have benefited from the support of a foreign state, sometimes without knowing anything about it. But again, so far, this does not seem to have led to any real gains for the states involved.
The report makes more than 4 dozen recommendations to improve federal preparedness, foster transparency, and shore up electoral integrity.
Well, the federal government says that it is prepared to help Canadians directly if U.S. tariffs have a big impact.
Sources tell CTV News the Liberals are willing to roll out a sizable stimulus package to Canadian businesses and workers if the level of tariffs from the U.S. requires such a response. The amount of stimulus, which could come in the form of unemployment benefits or incentives to keep employees, will depend on the extent of tariffs Trump imposes on Canadian goods. Trump has threatened a broad 25% tariff on all imports, but there are also reports that tariffs could start small and only apply to certain products.
Well, speaking of south of the border, there's a trend of Canadian real estate owners in Florida selling off their homes.
Yeah, experts say weak loonie and high insurance costs are driving snowbirds from the Sunshine State. The National Association of Realtors says Canadians made up nearly 1/4 of foreign sellers in Florida between April 2023 and March 2024 versus 11% a year earlier. Residents and real estate agents say the higher cost of living, the risk of damage from natural disasters, and a growing taste for travel to different destinations each winter account for the snowbird flight.
Well, the real estate broker in Florida says that she's overloaded with listings right now, mostly from Canadian sellers.
There is a surplus. I tell my clients that if they're serious about selling, it really has to be priced accordingly, especially if you own a condominium, you're in some sort of HOA. There's not, to be honest, there's not a lot of Canadian buyers. They're extremely rare. It's mainly sellers. But the great thing about South Florida is it really is a melting pot. So we do still have our locals, a lot of people from the Northeast, for example, a lot of buyers from New York, New Jersey, Boston, Chicago. And we also have people from South America. So it is affecting Canadians right now, but we still have a huge wide demographic for other buyers.
Well, new rules are forcing Florida condos to submit a true accounting of the state of good repair of their properties, as well as have a plan and budget for required maintenance.
It's 5:52, -6 out there. You're watching Live at 5.
A rare celestial event. It's happening tonight. We're going to talk to CTV science and technology expert Dan Riskin. That's next.
Bounce back day for tech stocks after a big drop on questions about the money being spent on artificial intelligence.
The spotlight did remain on NVIDIA, whose expensive chips, they're powering much of the move into AI. So its shares rallied nearly 9%. This is after plunging close to 17%. That was yesterday. Well, questions were raised about the cost of AI after the Chinese company DeepSeek reported success at a fraction of what's being spent in the U.S. So the head of Canadian AI firm Coyote says that the future of artificial intelligence is not about unlimited resources, but about smart, efficient solutions.
Well, the stars are aligning. Well, actually, the planets are aligning. We are in for a very unique celestial event that you won't even need a telescope to see.
And with all the details that are, let's just say, out of this world, we turn to CTV science and technology expert Dan Riskin. Dan, what are we talking about? What is happening?
Yeah, well, so the planets are lining up and getting themselves right in position so you can see them in the evening sky. I mean, you got to get those clouds out of the way. I can only do so much as your science guy. I mean, you got to have clouds out of the way before you can see the planets. But they're going to be lined up pretty nicely. Everybody's showing up to the party except for Mercury. Mercury's the only one out, but if you look at the sky, you'll see Venus, you'll see Saturn, you'll see Jupiter, and you'll see Mars, all clearly visible in the night sky after the sun goes down. Uranus and Neptune are both up there as well, but you can't see those ones with the naked eye. And so it's just a great time to be outside. And listen, if you want to know which one's which, there are great apps that are free for the phone, and it really, there are a couple ways in which a phone can distract you from the world, but having a good app on your phone that tells you which star is which and which planet is which really does make a difference.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. These so-called planetary parades, Dan, they're not super rare, but they don't happen every year. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the planets, I mean, if you don't think about it, you just imagine that the planets could be anywhere in the sky at any given time. But when you look at a model of the solar system, you see that they're all moving in a plane. They're all on this flat thing. It's almost like there's a piece of paper in space and everything's glued to it. And so they're always moving like that. And we're also on that plane. So when we look in the sky, we're not going to see planets in any random direction. We're only going to see them in that plane. And so as a result of that, you can see in that graphic how the planets line up in a line. That's what we're looking into, that plane in space. And so it's called the ecliptic, and that line through space, the planets are always on it, but sometimes they're on the day side, and then you can't see it because it's too bright out, and sometimes they're on the night side. And when they're on the night side, sometimes they're in the evening sky, and sometimes they're early in the morning before the sun comes up. So what's nice now is that they just so happen to all be lining up very nicely just after the sun goes down so that you can get a great look. So my hint for people is near where the sun has set, look for a really bright one. That's Venus. That's the brightest thing you're going to see. Okay. Next to that, you're going to find Saturn. And then above you is Jupiter. And then the red one that's sort of off to the side, that's Mars. And so it's just a great opportunity to see some planets and know which ones you're looking at.
Hey, Dan, I've used some of these apps before. They're free. All you do is like literally download it and hold your phone up to the sky, take a picture, and it'll tell you what you're looking at.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And you can also plan things. So you can say, well, where, if I go out, this summer and I'm going to be staying in a place where I don't think there's going to be a lot of light pollution, what's the night sky going to look like there? And maybe that's more nerdy than most people, but I love doing that. I love looking through time. And it also gives you a sense of the motion of those planets. And the more you sort of pay attention to that stuff and the more you pay attention to the sky, the more you can kind of get a sense that we really are on a ball in space, just floating around, because it's not that everything goes around us, it's that we're just traveling through it. And so, you were just talking about AI, and science holds the future, right? I mean, all this great stuff that's coming, but it's also a big part of where we come from and our past and just our place in the universe.
Fascinating stuff, and what a cool thing to show the kids as well. Dan Briskin, good to be with you and have fun watching tonight. We appreciate this.
Thanks,
will do.
All right, it's 5:59. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Well, it's official. Ontario residents will be heading to the polls on February 27th. Thanks so much for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.